Welcome to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. We feature top entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world, those who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective to their life and business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, David Nilsson here. I'm the host of the show. We started the Future is Borderless to connect with business leaders around the world who have what I refer to as a borderless mindset. And so the idea here is to share new ideas, best practices, innovations, things that will help us grow both personally and professionally, and ultimately thrive in a rapidly changing world. Now, this episode is brought to you by Doxa Talent. Doxa helps businesses source full-time, highly skilled workers from all over the world. And as a result, these companies can scale faster, increase margin, and improve culture. If you want to learn how to grow your business with offshore professionals, simply visit doxatalent.com. All right. Well, I'm excited for today's show. Our guest is Randy Wootton, who is a go-to-market executive who's been helping SaaS companies grow for over 20 years. He serves as the CEO of Maxio today, which is a leading provider of billing and financial operations solutions for high-growth B2B SaaS companies. I think I got it. Got it right. Okay. And in his last role, he was the chief strategy officer and president of Percolate, which is a seismic company. And he led their transformation from a mid-market social media product to an industry-leading content marketing platform for some of the world's largest companies. Prior to that, he was the CEO of Rocket Fuel. And during his career, he's held senior positions at both Microsoft and Salesforce. Wow, that's a lot. Randy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here, Dave.
Awesome. Well, look, you've been a CEO many, many times. I'm just curious, when did you first realize that was a position that you'd actually like to take on? Was that an ambition from the get-go, or was that something that just happened naturally?
Yeah, well, I keep doing it. I'm still trying to get it right. So we'll see if I ever get it right. But, Dave, if I think about my background, the one thing you didn't mention is actually I started in the Navy, and I went to the Naval Academy a long time ago. And when you go to the Naval Academy, it's one of those things you're driven by clearly your desire to serve. Do cool things. I got to fly jets. But I think at the core, it's also about wanting to learn how to be a leader. And they call the Naval Academy a leadership laboratory. And I think a lot of people who go there are really interested in becoming a leader in the military, much like you do at West Point and Air Force. So this idea of being the captain of a ship is something that I wanted to do for many, many years. I had the good fortune to go to business school. And I think what translated for me as I moved from the military context to the corporate context was the same idea. Well, what's the captain of the ship in the corporate world? And that was the CEO. And so I think through my entire life, I've always wanted to be at the nexus of information. I always like being in the middle of things. And it's fun to be the guy or the gal in the seat. And so it was an ambition. I didn't know it was going to happen. I feel very fortunate for my first gig at Rocket Fuel. And then I think it's easier to get the CEO gig after you've done it once.
Yeah, I could see that. Actually, it's funny. I was going to ask you about what did you learn in the Navy that prepared you for business? I think you put that all together, so I appreciate that.
I'll tell you one thing that is different about the Navy versus the corporate sector. I always joke about. In the Navy, it's lead, follower, get out of the way, and you learn followership first, so that in the heat of battle, you do what you're told, and you're not following unlawful orders. But you certainly, there's clarity. And I take great pride in being a good follower. And then you learn how to be a good leader. The big shift for me in the corporate sector was it was lead, follower, let's talk about it. And I was like, what do you mean, let's talk about it? Is it your decision? Is it my decision? I don't care. You just make the decision. And so I think to your question, one of the really interesting things about coming from a military environment is you really have a sense for accountability, for making decisions and iterating quickly. And taking accountability. And I think in big corporate settings, it's really easy to kind of be the voice of no. Like you think you can say no to everything, but it's very rare to have people come up and say, I'm taking ownership for it. And if it doesn't work, I'm taking accountability for it.
Do you think the sense of ownership and accountability is also what's helped you sort of move up in the ranks per se?
I think so. I think it's what I would say for CEOs, there are three things the CEOs have to do. One is they have to deliver the results. If you're not delivering results, then you need to be super transparent in having scorecards and ways of measuring things and talking about what's working and what's not. And if you're not hitting the results and you're not transparent, you just got to show a lot of hustle. And so I think one of the things in my life, it's always been about, wait, how do I measure success? What are we trying to do? How do we measure success? What does world-class look like? And then being completely transparent about it. One of my favorite reviews I got was from a senior leader at Avenue A. And in my review, it came back. He said, Randy's the guy that if something's going wrong is going to show up at your door at 8 o'clock in the morning and tell you something's wrong. Here's what we're doing. And I'll report back to you every 4 hours. And like, I do think that level of accountability and transparency, you build and engender trust over time, and people get more and more confident that even if it doesn't work, which it never always works, like you're going to provide transparency and invite them to participate in the solution.
Yeah. There's a book I think called Radical Accountability that sort of reminds me of, and funny, you described you in the early years, and I can think of that person in my own organization, and I trust her with everything, and I keep testing her capacity, and she keeps outperforming. And so I can see why that worked.
The other part on that, just one last point, is I think I've evolved in my understanding of that as a CEO. And so my first time as CEO, and I imagine maybe for you as well, is you're kind of fraught with the imposter syndrome. Right? There is no training to become the CEO. You need to be able to understand all the different functions. You got to connect the dots. You got to pattern match. You got to anticipate around the corners. It's really scary. And you're all alone, right? You're all alone. You got everyone below you telling you you're doing it wrong. The investors above you are telling you you're doing it wrong. And you got to have this confidence to make the call. And I think that when I had my first gig, I was perhaps more resistant to suggestions because I thought they were questioning my ability. But now in this third gig, where I'm working with an incredible general partner, Chelsea Stoner at Battery, like I come to him regularly and say, hey, I don't know. This is what I got going on. What do you think? You've been in this space for 10 years. You tell me about CFOs. What should we be doing? And it's released me from a lot of self-imposed pressure and fear of failure, having had a couple of, at-bats as a CEO.
Yeah, it's funny. I do think we actually talk about this a lot with guests on the show. I think every entrepreneur, every CEO does feel a sense of imposter syndrome. And look, if you figured that out, great. I still feel it on a regular basis. The difference is, to what you said, is I'm now open about it, right? So now I don't feel like I have to have all the answers, but I can actually openly admit to my team or anybody else that, hey, these are problems that we're still trying to figure out, and that's okay.
And I talk about that as leading with humility, which is about having self-awareness and empathy. And so the self-awareness is, as a CEO, you're going to have a strong suit. So in your opening, for example, I'm a go-to-market guy. That means, though I can talk about business requirements, I'm not going to go and tell you like how you should think about Ruby on Rails versus Python. But I can admit that and then invite people in to say, well, help me understand how you're thinking about it and why are you recommending X and Y. And so it's more about facilitating conversations and decision-making in areas where there's less expertise. And in the areas where I know a little bit, it's more around digging at another level of detail. Help me understand how you think about that and why this versus that.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, one thing I'm really interested in, because I've been the CEO of two different organizations, but I started them both. So I got to decide that, right?
Yeah.
But you've actually been brought into different organizations as CEO. I'm curious, though, about what the first 90 days looks like when you're coming in, a team's already up and operating. They've got history, context, so on and so forth. Like, how do you jump in and take ownership of that role?
Well, anytime someone needs a CEO, something's wrong, right? If you're growing like crazy and you're knocking all your numbers out of the park and you're doing, the investors are super excited, you don't need a professional CEO. Now, it may be a thing in terms, the situation may be the company, I'm mostly software. So most of the companies that I work with are founded by really technical folks who don't want to manage people, don't want to manage operations, and they can move into a CTO role, but they recognize they need someone to be more of the operator, professional, go-to-market guy. So that's the best case scenario when you come in and you have complementary skills. Two situations I had it was just things weren't working and I had to come in and, clean it up. So I think the first 90 days, or it actually starts before you show up. It's the work you do in the due diligence with the investors, because I'm always brought in by like a PE firm or a VC firm that is syndicate that's saying, we know something's wrong. We don't know what it is. And you spend that first 30 days, phase 0, just getting up to speed and doing all your due diligence. Primarily, again, for me, it's sales. So that would be like bookings, growth, churn, reasons, system structure, processes. And in the first 90 days of being the CEO in chair, you're listening, right? You're trying to identify and diagnose what's happening, what's working, what's not, what are the big rocks you have to go after first, and you're doing a lot of evaluation of the team. I think you send signals with everything you do in the first 30, 60, 90 days as a CEO, and it's in your best interest to let go of someone. on the executive team. Someone is not meeting the mark. You go in, you say, hey, you need to change these three things, or they don't, boom. And that sends a signal to the executive team, like the old business is not going to work. And we've got to create this sense of urgency for change. Where do we need to go? Because what has been working has not been working, right? And so it's a really different mandate than what you've been able to do is just, have incredible success and grow it. And then, well, now I'm going to go off and do another one and have incredible success and grow it. Like we would never meet in our worlds.
You know what? I would love to have you tell my story then in the future, because you paint a much prettier picture than reality. But you know what? Actually, so let's talk about, you talk about being a go-to-market guy and scaling businesses. A lot of the people that I spend time with are businesses that sit within that, maybe $10 million to $50 million mark, and they're trying to get from one level to the next. Given your experience, I wonder if there's like any suggestions you have or any sort of correlations you've seen between those that succeed in doing that and those that don't.
Yeah. I'm primarily a tech guy, so I'll talk in terms of technology. There is these different inflection points. And so I think 10 million is a really good sort of benchmark for changing how you think about running a company and growing a company. Prior to that, as CEO, you're the primary salesperson. You're closing the deals. Even if you're the product person, you're closing the deals. You're the one that building the product. And so you're really trying to ensure you have product market fit. What you often find is early stage startups hire an expensive head of sales before they have product market fit or an ability to drive replicable revenue. To drive replicable revenue, you have to have a predictable pipeline. You got to be able to train, ramp AEs, and you've got to be able to have them hit their quota. If you make all that investment in marketing and sales and you don't have a replicable motion, you've just burned all that VC money. Mm-hmm. So that's often what happens is these companies get to that 30, 40 million and they're out of money. And that's where they got to bring me in to say, okay, well, let's reevaluate, put some more cash in, figure out what we're going to do, streamline structure, et cetera. So I think companies often spend money ahead of building a system. And, it's hard. Like, how do you get a person who's done it a couple of times to be a VP of sales at a Series A company? As though there's a lot of tension there. But I think that's number one. Number two is you want to be super clear in terms of what type of model you're building. Are you going after SMB? Are you going after mid-market? Are you going after enterprise out of the gate? Are you doing a sales-led motion? Are you doing product-led growth? And so it's almost like your monetization strategy. And if you're not a go-to-market person, like this is where your investors, if you're taking money from VCs, you want to make sure you're getting a VC that has operating partners that are go-to-market experts that can help you think about it. So, for example, there's a guy named Bill Bench at Battery. He was at Marketo, helped him global scale. He did Pendo, global scale. Now, I'm a go-to-market guy. We chat, and I still learn stuff from him. But he's an operating partner that's available to the portfolio for first-time CEOs to really think deeply about their go-to-market strategy.
Yeah. Is it hard then, as your CEO coming in this case, turnaround scenarios? Is it hard to bring someone in at that point then? Because someone that's burned up enough cash, like now they're in a place where like, we got to sort of restructure, retool the organization. Is it harder to bring those people in at that point?
Yeah, again, in the due diligence, you have to have done enough work on the modeling to understand what the burn is, and then you cut it or you increase the burn by 30%, you reduce your forecast by whatever, 20%. And you ensure you got enough cash. And as part of that, and we call it enough capital, you want to have enough cash to be able to do a couple of moves and know it's not going to work. And you want enough equity that when you go out to hire senior executives, you're able to say, and this is the package. Because one of the things that work to your advantage is the most recent 409A is probably going to have the company valued at a low valuation. And so you can start talking upside. But you do have to be able to sell them on, we're going to invest in sales tech like Seismic. We're going to invest in Lessonly, like sales readiness. We're going to invest in BDRs. We're going to invest in BDR. So it's almost like the way I describe it is you want to build a go-to-market engine. And there's a way of thinking about how many sales engineers do you have to AEs? Do you have to AMs? Do you have BDRs? And there's a bunch of information out there you can use for benchmarks. And you get that unit of work. And then you have the marketing and you say, okay, if we get this much pipeline coverage, we are going to build the next unit of work. Much like on the product and engineering side, you say, hey, I need one product manager to one engineering manager, 4 engineers. I need a designer, 1/3 of a designer for every product manager. And you have a unit of work. And so when you build and scale your And product and engineering organizations, similarly, you can't have more engineers than you have a product manager. You can't have a product manager without a product designer. And so on the go-to-market side, it's really similar.
Wow. So you said the mistake that often people make is that they sort of overinvest before they have product market fit.
Yeah, right.
So let's pretend someone though has then reached that $10 million mark, nice inflection point for the business. Now they got to think about restructuring. What are your thoughts on the sort of next steps for them there?
So I use a rule of 80% of your AEs need to be making at least 80% of quota before you add anybody else. Meaning you're feeding the AE you have, because if the AE is not getting fed, or the head of sales in this case is not getting fed, they're going to quit. So they got to be able to make quota without putting a bunch of spiffs on top. So that's number one. I use a 4 to 5x pipeline coverage, meaning you want to make this much money. Show me that marketing, inbound marketing, or if you have BDAs and BDRs that are helping to do outbound out of the gate, you're able to create 5x of what you want. And you should be able to show 20 to 30% close rates. So if you put those three pieces together, you have a go-to-market engine. If you're able to drive more pipeline, your AE is still closing at the rate they need to be closing, then you add another AE. Now, AEs hate it when you add new AEs because their territory just shrunk.
Totally.
And that's where you need a head of sales who's able to see more broadly. Like if I hit more, if I take on more AEs, I'm going to drive more growth, and that's what they're being held accountable for. So it's a little bit different in terms of the incentives, but there are clear metrics of putting that whole system together around the go-to-market engine.
I love the intentionality behind watching the numbers, because if you're investing in marketing at the same time you're expanding your sales force, that tension between the two should help scale. I actually just talked to somebody yesterday who said, I've been trying to scale up my sales. I doubled my sales force and I got the same number of sales.
Why? Because they weren't driving the pipeline.
That's right.
And that's one of the things I think of is trying to, because you'll probably buy a marketing person before you buy a salesperson, right? So if you get a marketing person who's focused on, and marketing is really complicated. I mean, that's my background and experience, demand creation, demand capture. You usually start with a website and then search, and you build on that, all that sort of stuff. You build your list, but ultimately you're trying to build a pipeline. And pipeline is a joint effort between marketing and sales. So you got to hold them jointly accountable for pipeline. Like marketing has to feel it can't be, I gave you all these MQLs and you took them as SEOs and we didn't get the right conversion rate. But the thing I love about it, Dave, it's literally like you apply science to something that doesn't seem scientific, which is sales. And it's all in marketing, right? And you can go from the top and you look at your conversions through your funnel. It rolls into your sales pipeline. What's going on all the way down to win rate? How do you learn and go back up? See where things are getting stuck? How do you drive initiatives and campaigns and content to affect both awareness to preference and choice?
Do you expect declining efficiencies in the pipeline as you scale up?
Wow. No. No. Why would you assume that? That's an interesting question.
Well, I mean, when you say hey, 80% hitting 80% of their quota, and then hey, look, close rates are still at 20 or 30%, right? As you start to scale up, I assume you start to test sources where you're unlikely to hit gold every single time, right? So as you scale up, I would assume you're starting to stretch and that's assuming that there's a cap to, how far someone can
go. That's what I'm saying. So usually I'm in markets where so for example, at Maxio, we think there's 10,000 billing opportunities every year based on the total number of software companies. So what is the available pool? Not the TAM, but literally in market. Of that, we saw 2,000. So we had 2,000 sales accepted opportunities last year. So I think there's 8,000 opportunities we're not part of. How do you get after those 8 opportunities? How do you create awareness? How do you bring people into the market that are not in the market? But if they're happening, where are they happening? So I think I've never lived in a world of constraint growth or TAM. It's always been about how do you go get more of it? I would have argued that I think as you become a category leader, you then benefit from more people calling you first or calling you last, and your close rates are probably going to go up. And I saw that at Seismic. So Seismic, when we sold Percolate to Seismic, call them 200 million-ish, but they were 3x bigger than the competition. Yeah. And our close rates were world-class. Now, having said that, we did have different segments, and so close rates were different, but that was also one of my favorite things to talk to people, especially early stage CEOs is a concept called sales velocity. Sales velocity is a combination of your average sales price, number of opportunities, win rates divided by your days to close. If you know those four metrics and talk to your investors about them and what's working, what's happening, you have a deep insight into your sales engine. The one I was pointing to was as you go up, your days to close will probably be longer because now you're in a multi-person buying scenario, et cetera. Your average sales price should go up though, right? And number of opportunities may be lower. And so you create a segment, your strategic or enterprise segment, which has a different cost associated with it, but the close rate should still be pretty good. Yeah. Now, down at the bottom segment, if you're in an SMB, really early stage, hyper competitive market, super fast transaction, you're selling, every 10 days a new product at a $5,000 price point. Maybe your close rate is lower, but it's because of the dynamics of the market and the price. And if your overall brand is bigger, I think and scaling, very few companies get to 100 million, right? Like it's 1% to 2% of all companies get to $100 million in revenue. If you're there, you're the category leader, you're going to, the benefits of being a category leader is going to accrue in terms of profit over time.
Are you familiar with the book Play Bigger?
Of course, it's one of my favorite. I use it that's another one that I always use is play bigger. It's define the category. Where can you play? Leads to a strategic narrative, positioning, messaging. You've got to define. The other one on that is, did you ever read Playing to Win?
I don't think so.
All right. Playing to Win is one of my favorite strategy books. I've used it at 4 different companies. Everyone should go buy it. It literally talks about what's your aspiration, where are you going to win? So that's the category thing. And you go into Play Bigger, which talks to you all about category creation. And you get down to the level of thinking about, what are the capabilities we need to build? So do you have a inside sales motion? Do you have enterprise sales motion? And then what are the management systems? And in this case, bringing it back to Borderless, like how are you thinking about a capability to manage a hybrid work environment, which is the new world order? That's a new capability that we're all kind of trying to make sense of. So how do you do that? And how do you think about it? And what are the systems and processes you need in place to make that work? And then that goes back up your strategy.
Yep. Well, it's funny. You've said category leader or category king a few times. So I had to assume that you've been introduced to the concept. And it's one I love too. And I would agree with you that actually, as you start to establish yourself as a category king, actually it becomes easier to close business and people are proactively seeking you out. So I love it. Let's talk about what you're working on today. So you're the CEO of Maxio.
Yep.
For some of the people here who may not be familiar with the company, tell us a little bit about what Maxio does, but more importantly, what's the pain point or opportunity it's solving for the customer?
Yeah, well, I speak to it as one who was a customer. So Maxio is a combination of 2 companies, one called SaaS Optics and one called Chargify. SaaS Optics is revenue recognition, subscription management. And I just remember as CEO of a subscription business, how much time and energy I spent with my CFO and FP&A team trying to close the books, figure out the operating metrics, do the investor reports. It was mind-boggling. It was always wrong. The Excel files didn't work, took too long. And so that pain was the one that I felt acutely. We bought then at Percolate, we bought SaaS Optics, and it changed my life. Like literally, my CFO went from spending 10 days closing the books and then the next 10 days of the cycle trying to figure out all the operating metrics to being able to push a button and get what my ARR was, LTV to CAC, churn, magic number, all the SaaS operating metrics. So then day one, after the month close, I could spend time with my CEO or CFO sort of talking about what was going on. So there is an enormous amount of efficiency gained for the CFO, financial operations professionals, and the CEO. The capability I wasn't as familiar with was Chargify, which is basically a billing capability where you get credit cards, et cetera. And so companies that have subscription businesses that want to do credit cards, ACH, et cetera, Chargify was the billing engine that enabled that. So we put those 2 things together. And now what we help companies do is bill, collect, and report. With 606, there's a whole nother level of terms of revenue recognition that you have to maintain, subscription management. And so we cover all that, GAAP compliant, IFRS compliant, like we reduce inefficiency and risk for SaaS businesses. And why this is important, Dave, is because then I sold Percolate to Seismic. At Seismic, I was chief strategy officer and I ran acquisitions. I bought a company that was a SaaS Optic customer. They were 3 times bigger than another company I bought, which wasn't a SaaS Optic customer. And all the contracts were in place. There was no issue with their customer waterfall, cohort analysis, the revenue waterfall, their ARR. Like it all made sense, and it sorted because it was all tied together in the invoicing bill of record. This other company, one third the size, took probably 5x or 10x longer because the contracts were in like filing cabinets. And so we had to hire forensic accountants to go in and find all this stuff, and it extended the due diligence. So if you think about it as a CEO of an early stage company, and you're trying to get investment, and you want to go through the due diligence process, and you don't want to spend months of doing that, or you're going through an acquisition, you don't want to spend months of doing it, like investor grade reporting and insights, it makes all the difference.
So is it actually an accounting system, or does it sit in between the accounting system and CRM?
That's between your CRM. So often that's Salesforce or HubSpot. An early stage company, your general ledger, which is QuickBooks or Xero.
Yep.
As companies get bigger, they often replace QuickBooks or Xero with like a NetSuite or an Intact. But we sit between the two. And so we take the orders as they're registered in your CRM, do the revenue recognition that then creates a transaction journal entry in your general ledger. But we also understand that we are the source of truth for revenue and subscription management. When's the next customer's coming up? What does that mean? How do you break out your ARR for software versus your professional services? How do you do the revenue recognition for that? And then ultimately we track expenses as well, so we can give you cash forecasting. And in this environment, that's the most important thing, is how much cash do I have in the bank? When am I getting more? And when do I run out?
Yeah, absolutely. It was funny. I'm chuckling to myself here because I know so many people. I might be guilty of this at times too. So we should probably talk, where you're waiting on that 2-week closing cycle at the end of the month so you can figure out where the heck you are, right? And I've seen that in so many businesses as an investor, as an operator, so on and so forth. So, how is it going? So you've joined the company in the last year, right? So like, what's happening and how are you guys performing?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing well. North of 25% year-over-year growth in 2022, which is great. I would say that, to our earlier comment, like when you come into a situation as CEO, you're spending your first 60, 90 days trying to figure out what's going on. And came in and one of the engines was on flame. And so you had to go figure out a bunch of stuff and, get the fire engine on it. And I would say going back to play bigger, one of the things I did immediately when I came in is the integration still felt a little haphazard. Like it wasn't a really integrated experience from the UI UX. So I put a lightning strike moment out. I went to SaaStr in September. So I started in June. I said, okay, by September, we're going to have a new website. We're going to have a new application. And the experience for prospects has got to be exactly the same. So we had a beautiful new brand, Maxio, but it wasn't playing out across our marketing materials or our application. So by September, we had a new website, we had a new application, we had a single sign-on, we had there's some tweaks and blah, blah, blah. We got to keep working on our design system. But it was like planting a flag and saying, we're going to hit this mark. And everyone was, there were a lot of people that were anxious about it. But I think in hindsight, everyone appreciated around this moment that wasn't going to change. You can't change the date for SaaStr. And right. What I learned this from was Mark Benioff at Salesforce. So he has Dreamforce every year. It is a forcing function for the entire company to come out with new innovation, new ideas. And as of May, coming into September, you're on hook for Dreamforce. And a huge company is still able to have that agility that they have like 3 releases a year, but the big releases are once a year. And you remember back in the day, like he was announcing a new cloud every year. And you're like, how's that possible? But he just like force of will. And so I do think those lightning strike moments or mini lightning strike moments that are forcing functions for people to get on board is really important.
I love it. I have to imagine that changed, gave people some anxiety though, knowing that like if you're even a day off, you've missed it, right?
You can't be. But I think what it helps too, Dave, is we didn't do everything we wanted to. Like we ended up with website V1. Our website V2 came out like last week. But what it forces is a collective effort around, okay, what's the most essential? Something's changed. What are we going to do? And so that point we were making earlier about decision-making, speed of decision-making, accountability, being transparent, it was as much about building a culture of constructive tension, connected alignment to deliver, and being able to make quick decisions and punt on stuff. And, I wish we had more done than we did, but I think everyone kind of took a deep breath and then said, all right, what's next?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious, regardless of how many customers you guys have, if you look across that customer set, I'm curious if there are any commonalities between them or places that you see that they often struggle or sort of miss opportunities.
Yeah, we're going to publish some information on this, Dave. So we have about 2,400 customers, and the new report will come out, I don't know, a couple of weeks. So if people have my email or just follow me on LinkedIn, we'll give it to you. Because we have $13 billion in billings going across our system.
Oh,
So we know exactly what's going on for that set of customers, and we split it by segments between like 0 and 1 million, 1 and 5 million, 10 to 30 million, 30 to 50 million. So all of this benchmarking data built on billings, this becomes our ability to build our brand. Is we've got proprietary data, we're going to share it, et cetera. And what I would say is there are inflection points. One of the ones is the 10 million. The other one is actually interesting, about 5 million.
yeah.
0 to 5 million in revenue, you see this continual growth, great growth, even 21 to 22. Between 5 and 10, there's a slowdown. And I think it's because of what we were talking about before. A lot of companies at 5 billion, they're almost product market fit. They're not sure. They maybe hire some people. Things start to get muddled. They get the Series A, right? But at 10 million, the people that continue to grow are the ones that got product market fit and they hit the accelerator. And so we see growth in that phase. And so we'll share more about it. But I do think what I would really encourage people to look, well, I do a lot of writing on this, like how do you manage, what does the rule of 40 mean for a company that's under 10 million versus greater than 30 million? I think getting world-class benchmarks and using that to help guide your company in terms of customer acquisition costs, LTV to CAC, magic number, like really understanding the health of your go-to-market and how do you compare to other companies in your industry at that stage. That's where having a good VC, one of the top tier VCs can really help because they have such purview across the world. So we'll publish data on it, but I think everywhere I go, you say, here are the benchmarks. Bessemer has them. KeyBank has them. There was just a report. Again, if people want to reach out, I'm happy to share it. There's a great report that was just published by the SaaS CFO on CFO tech stack, which has some benchmarks for people. So I think of it as like, where are you looking to define what world-class looks like?
Yeah, love it. I think it's a fantastic. You know what? I'm not actually surprised to hear that there's between 5 and 10 million, there's another threshold because I've seen this so many times. I'm very active in the entrepreneurs organization. You see these people that they get up to 5 million, but they don't quite make the investment in the team that's going to help them grow from there. And so they try to keep that scrappy bootstrap entrepreneur sort of culture going through that period of time. And eventually it does break. I mean, it's pretty common.
Dave, that's great. And you have so much more experience than I do at that stage. I think of it as one of the military models is you have these org structures. So you have the idea of a fire team, which is 4 or 5 people. Then you have a platoon, which is like 15. And then you have a company, which is like 3 platoons or 150. And then you have the next, whatever is a brigade. And I really think that corresponds with inflection points for company size. Like what we find is when companies get about 30 people, they move from having outsourced CPAs to hiring their first finance person. And that's a controller or a VP of finance. And then that changes how they think about that whole operation. Before it was like, hey, I just need to pay people and pay my taxes. You have a different set of problems when you got 30 people and they're in multiple states. That though allows you to get probably to like, I don't know, 150 to 200 people. Now you have a different inflection point. Now you're not able to meet everybody every week. And now you got to think about how do you create management systems and performance reviews, and it's different energy than what it was when it was only 10 people. Well, I don't know, 200 people, I think, to about 1,000 is probably the next stage for me, right? So that corresponds with that kind of brigade versus company size, and you need a major running that, not a captain. And so do you have the skills and experiences? And if not, who are you going to get as a mentor to help coach? I remember when I took over Rocket Fuel was a public company. I got a battlefield promotion. Be careful what you wish for. But I asked for 3 things. I wanted a mentor, someone who'd done a turnaround before, and I ended up with an incredible mentor, a guy named Tony Zingali. I still incredibly grateful for him. I wanted a coach was someone who's going to help me understand how to manage boards because I'd never done that before. And I had a guy, John Baird, awesome. He was a coach to one of the Apple executives and just really awesome, helped me understand that whole imposter thing and blah, blah, blah. And the third thing is I wanted a group of peers. And I know you're involved with EO and YPO, and like I was too old for either of those. And I couldn't afford the Global 100. So I had to find this other group. And I ended up with it's called the Alliance of CEOs. I think they have around the country. But I can't tell you how powerful it was to have that support network as a first-time public company CEO to help me scale to run an organization that was, I don't know, we were 2,000 people, biggest organization I've ever ran. And, how do you think about that and all the complexity and blah, blah, blah. Very, very different than when I walked into Percolate and it was 200 people.
Yeah. There's got to be, I don't think I've ever read a book on this, but it seems like a really interesting topic because I remember one of my early mentors told me, Dave, the culture at your startup, it's so great, but be careful at about 50, it's going to change dramatically. And I refused to accept that. But the reality is around 75 and it starts to shift, and how you lead, how you think about that has to shift. Same thing with how you organize the business strategies, all that stuff. So anyways, there's your next book idea.
Well, there's a book out there. There's a really interesting book, Linda Hill, Becoming a Manager, which has this idea of, and there's another book out there called Transitions, which is a book about people making these transitions at different stages. And the number one transition is when you move from an individual contributor to a manager.
Yeah.
Because you've gone from a place where you're being rewarded and recognized for just getting stuff done, and it's all about me, to now working into a model like a servant leadership model. And how do you get the work out of people and recognize the people that aren't going to be the crushers that you were, and making that work. And then I think the next inflection point for me is at director. And so I tell the people, like, directors, you got to be directing something. You got to be directing strategy, resources, or an organization. And so there's an inflection point there. And then when you get to VP, there's another inflection point.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said Linda Hill.
Linda Hill. She's a Harvard woman, incredibly successful. It's called Becoming a Manager. I wish I had it. I can't put my finger on it. Great. And there's another book, which I really found valuable, which is called Transitions, which had this same idea of, as you make a transition up, scaling up, so let me give you an example. So my executive team, I talk about having to put a leadership system in place. And a leadership system in place allows you to create alignment. It allows you to start taking the executive team and moving them to think about what needs to be true in the next 12 to 18 months. If you are spending time as an executive in a company our size, 240, worried about what's happening this month, you're overfunctioning. And so how do you create an organization at this stage where you have directors focused on the quarter, VPs focused on the half, and you're focused on the year? And so that's how you allocate time and energy, the type of decisions you care about, because it's super easy to go back down and solve the problems that you know how to solve when you were in that role 3 years ago. How do you stretch to be able to solve the problems that we get paid the bucks because we're solving problems or making bets that are going to pay off in 12 to 18 months, that whole Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. Like, I'm spending all my time in Horizon 2 and, scared of crap because I'm putting capital investments in these things and I don't know if they're going to work. But that's where the team has to make the bet, because that's the future growth.
Yeah, we'll put those in the show notes. I'm an avid reader, and there's, big fan of developing talent from within, but that is the transition that is the hardest, is when you take someone from an individual contributor to a manager. And I think helping to frame that would be great. Hey, let's talk about workspace. You brought this up a minute ago. I have two businesses. We have no office space whatsoever. Yeah. I know a lot of people are struggling. Do I go back to the office? Do I go hybrid? Yeah. If I do hybrid, am I world-class in either? Like, how do you guys think about it? And what are you sort of working on right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dave. I would tell you that my default has always been in the office, because my magic happens when I'm with someone else. We got a whiteboard. And so it was really hard for me to move to a world that was remote. The role I took at Seismic, though, was a very small role. It was chief strategy officer. I had 3 people, and all my work was on call. So I was fortunate that I wasn't CEO at the beginning of COVID. Right now, I personally struggle. I go to our office headquarters is in Atlanta. I go there once a month for a week. I bring all the executive team in for a week, and it's where the magic happens. And then the rest of the other 3 weeks are kind of like, we have our 2-hour executive call once a week, and I have my one-on-ones, but it doesn't feel the same. And so I think that I'm glad I'm at the sort of tail end of my career on this. I think for specific roles, they need to be in office. And so I think of like BDRs, early stage developers, where you really need mentorship. And I think it's really hard to do that. For someone coming out of college and you're teaching them how to do cold calling, and you're trying to watch the Zoom or the Gong call. So that's my predisposition. I do think that there are roles that are better to have some type of environment where there can be in-person coaching and just fast iteration. Similar for developers. Like, you need the lead developer to help the young developer understand the code base, et cetera. So I am not a full remote dude. Having said that, I think what was fascinating was we found that the technology had developed to a level that enabled remote work in a way that none of us thought was possible probably beforehand. And so we were a customer of Doxa. I have a couple of folks that are supporting me out of the Philippines, and they're part of the team. Technology works, Zoom works, Slack works. Unfortunately, they kind of accommodate our business hours, so I feel bad about that. But them being on the team, they're part of Maxio, and so it's been great. It's been great.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I always tell people, I think from a productivity standpoint, being remote works just great. From a collaboration standpoint and for human connection, there's still a lot to learn and a lot to work through. So
yeah, and to that point, Dave, like we just did our company kickoff and I brought everybody in. I couldn't afford to bring Poland in this time, but if we hit our number next year, I'm going to bring Poland. But we brought everyone from Ireland and across the US in. And so I don't know, 240, 180, 190 people. And it was magical. Yeah. And I took that lesson from the CEO that I worked for at Seismic, a guy named Doug Winter, big company. They were really hybrid. All their engineering was out of China, and he would do this every year. And he spent a bunch of money on it. And I remember he and the CFO arm wrestled over it as a line item. And Doug said, "I don't care. I'm doing it." And it was magic. And so when I told Battery I was doing it, they're like, "Really?" And then who's our investors? I asked Chelsea and Dylan to come, and they were part of it. And they were like, "Wow, that was really good." And none of our other companies asked us to come. And I said, "Well, if you're going to poke at them for the expense, they're not going to invite you to come." But, we did it super frugally. We did a casino night at our own office, and it doesn't have to be lavish. But I think to your point, having the opportunity to have the bonding, having those impromptu conversations, identifying a problem, going off in the corner, like there's just something special about it.
Yeah, no question about that. We always say we're remote first, not remote only.
Yeah.
Twice a year we get everyone together for that same reason. And
That's great.
Nothing compares.
And I don't think you save a lot of money. I mean, it's not like you go to remote just to save money because you're going to pay for these other things, et cetera. So it's for me, it's a recruiting tool.
Absolutely.
If I can have people working for me out of South Dakota, hopefully they'll stay with me. I got one dude in Australia, and he just wanted to move to Australia. I was like, "Cool, you can be contracted, be in Australia." Like, it works. So, like, I can't compete with the price in this. Well, maybe now in the stock with Google and Facebook, et cetera. But in technology, it's so hard, as you guys, probably saw the Great Resignation and just everyone going on different jobs. Like, this is now almost like a requirement is to have a remote first or a intentional hybrid hiring and culture build model.
Yeah, I 100%. There's a great report McKinsey put out that there's these new personas that are emerging, and a commonality between 4 of the 5 was radical flexibility. And so I think that's just something that as employers we're just going to have to embrace. Randy, I know we're getting close to the end of the time. I would love to just kind of understand. I always love asking CEOs, what are they reading right now, and where are they trying to get better personally?
Wow. Well, I'm a voracious reader. I'm in 4 book clubs. One of them I just finished was a gender series where we went through and looked at books written about women by women since way back when. And we went through The Second Sex, The Feminine Mystique. We just did The Handmaid's Tale, which is a haunting story. And so I was an English major. I taught literature. I love stuff like that. The other one I'm doing, which I really recommend people who don't have a lot of time, is called the Slow Read Symposium. It meets once a week. I'm actually doing Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, and you just take a couple of scenes a week, and it's just fun to engage with people who care about working through Shakespeare. The third book I'm reading is Sam Adams with my family, which is a historical study of the Revolutionary. It's just fascinating. And then on the book club, I lead a book club at every company I go to, and we're doing Think Again, which is a great book about, how do you counter your initial thinking and come up with a different idea. So yeah, I talk to people like I'm always operating at the edge of my own ignorance, right? And so To my earlier point, I love ideas. I want to engage with people around conversations. I'm not good at small talk. So let's pick a book and have a conversation.
I love it. Operating at the edge of my own ignorance. We'll leave it there. We've been talking to Randy Wootton, the CEO of Maxio, a leading provider of billing and financial operations solutions for high growth B2B SaaS companies. Randy, where can people go to learn more about the work you guys do?
Yep, maxio.com or follow me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. We'll get that into our show notes. And thanks again for being on the show today.
My pleasure, Dave. Best of luck.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. Be sure to click subscribe to future episodes so you can hear from more top entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And we'll see you again next time.